Welcome to Life is Beautiful. I'm Anthony. So last week we did a bit of a deep dive into one of Germany's hardest to define beer styles, the Zeugel beer. And while talking about Zeugel, I mentioned something known as the Zeugel Stern or the Zeugel Star, which is a six-pointed star that is a critical part of the Zeugel beer's entire identity. It's attached to every tavern, every brew house, and almost every single bottle. It is just as important to the style as the actual flavor and sensory characteristics of the beer itself, maybe more so. Now, originally I wanted to put the Zeugel Stern and the Zeugel beer into the same video, but I realized there's just so much information, so much history behind the Zeugel Stern itself that it deserved its own video. I want to talk about the Zeugel Stern, its importance, its history, where it comes from, but also the fact that the six-pointed star is not just a part of Zeugel beer. In fact, it's a critical part of brewing and beer in all of southern Germany. Today I want to talk about not just the Zeugel Stern, I want to talk about the Brewers Star. So the history of the Brewers Star actually starts with the foundations, the conception of the hospitality industry as a whole. Historically, travel was rather reserved. Not everybody just got to kick off work for a couple weeks, go see the countryside or travel to far off destinations, see some cities they'd never been to. That was a privilege that was largely reserved for nobility, for the wealthy, for royalty, really. The average peasant and their family were not oftentimes going to be able to travel place to place, They would have to have some type of financier to be able to fund that travel for some type of greater purpose, right? It just was not something that everybody was able to do. But there also wasn't hotels and there wasn't restaurants, at least not to the degree that we understand in our modern society. Because back then, when the wealthy were traveling, they would usually be greeted by some other wealthy or noble person who would treat them as a guest. They would provide all their food and drink and additional supplies, whatever else they need to welcome them as a guest into their domicile. But things did start to change in Central Europe after the Roman invasion all through the Gallic lands, all through Iberia, all through France and Germany. Because everywhere the Romans went, they built roads. And those roads essentially became the modern day roads we have today to some degree. They plotted out those routes incredibly well. But by creating these roads, they created clear-cut pathways for people to be able to travel far and wide. Suddenly people were able to take longer trips and they were able to travel much further than they historically had been able to. So when these people were on the road, when they're going place to place, they needed some type of industry to be able to support their trips, somewhere for them to spend money, to get food, to get supplies, to sleep. And that's when we saw the conceptualization of restaurants, of hotels, of like convenience stores, essentially, a hospitality industry set up for people on the go. Now with these sprawling roadways going all across Europe, suddenly people of various different cultures, ethnicities, languages, most importantly, were able to go and cross paths with each other, go to new destinations where maybe they didn't speak the localized language. So the hospitality industry had to come up with some manner of being able to convey what goods they actually have to sell, what they have to offer. And the best thing to do was using images, pictures, because back then people would see and be like, oh, look, there's some mash paddles. There's a barrel hanging over this doorway. They probably have beer. Oh, look, grapevines and grape clusters. Maybe they have wine in there, so on and so forth. Blacksmithing, every industry, bakers, they all had their signs and symbols and equipment that people would easily recognize and identify as being some type of billboard advertising what is going to be sold inside of that building. In Germany, the symbol for breweries or beer taverns were known as Bierzeigers or beer signs. And around the 14th century in southeastern Germany, they decided that for their Bierzeiger, it was going to be a six-pointed star known as the Brauer Stern or the Brewer Star. Now you may be thinking to yourself, why would the Southern Germans decide on a six-pointed star over any and everything else, Like I said, if you look at most beer signs, they're going to have some type of imagery that automatically triggers the consumer to say, hey, I bet there's beer in there. But when you look at a six-pointed star, you don't necessarily say to yourself, oh boy, I'm thirsty. I could definitely go for a beer now. There's a lot of different theories that go behind this, and it is incredibly hard to tell what is the actual truth since most of this has largely been lost to time. I think one of the most accepted theories is that it is an alchemical symbol, a symbol that was utilized by alchemists, people who take one thing and turn it into another, right? Kind of similar to what brewers do. They take different ingredients and they turn it into beer. I mean, when you really think about it, there is a lot of correlation between brewers and alchemists, taking the ingredients, turning it into it, leaning over boiling liquid kettles, over an open fire. And when you take into consideration the fact that they did not understand yeast at all, you take all these ingredients, mix it together, it starts acting, reacting, bubbling away, and then boom, now you're able to get drunk off of it. It does kind of seem like magic. According to this theory, each point of the brewer's star symbolizes critical aspects of beer production. The first triangle signified fire to boil the beer, air to cool the wort, and earth to grow the ingredients. The second triangle represented the key ingredients of beer: hops, water, and barley. Because like I said, they didn't really understand yeast at that point in time, so it wasn't considered or factored into the equation. And this theory is so widely accepted because if you look at historical alchemical textbooks and journals from prolific alchemists, you will see that the triangle is frequently included within their iconography, oftentimes including the fire, the air, and the earth, or water, or whatever else. So when you take into consideration the fact that these two different professions do have a little bit of similarities, a little overlap there, it makes sense that they might have some shared concepts, ideas, and even symbols. The major problem with this theory is that by time the brewer's star was really adopted and utilized, the 14th century as I mentioned, Germany, the place where the brewer's star came from, was underneath the Holy Roman Empire, who had long forbid the practice of alchemy. So it doesn't make sense that a predominantly Catholic region who was absolutely under the control of and devout loyal subjects to the Holy Roman Empire would so brazenly and defiantly take alchemic symbols, outlawed practices, and raise it up as a banner. Now, there is a second theory, and this is the one I see talked about the most. When you look at a six-pointed star, you likely had some type of initial knee-jerk reaction thinking about ethnicities or religions, particularly the Judaic faith, since this symbol in that religion is known as the Star of David and has become the symbol of an entire religion and an entire nation, Okay, so to understand this Judaic theory and how it correlates to beer and brewing, we are going to have to take a little bit of a detour into the history of the Star of David. The home of the Brewer's Star is in southeastern Germany in the Franconian and Oberpfalz regions, which are located directly along the border of what was then the Kingdom of Bohemia, nowadays the Czech Republic. Now, Bohemia in the Middle Ages was actually rather interesting in how they handled and approached the Jewish people of Europe, where most countries had outlawed them, forbid them, or forced them into some type of subjugation or harsh legal restrictions and penalties. The Bohemian Kingdom widely accepted them in for different political and economic reasons. Now, in the capital of Bohemia, the city of Prague, there was actually an entire district that was dedicated to just the Jewish people, for them to immigrate to assimilate into Bohemian culture, for them to work, live, aggregate, and become Bohemian citizens, essentially. Now, every single district was responsible for their own protection, their own defenses of their district. So the Jewish people there were able to create a militia who were able to provide security and defense for the Jewish district. And they actually waved a battle banner that had the six-pointed star on it. And that banner eventually became kind of like the banner for the entire ethnicity, for the entire religion, the entire Jewish identity. Okay, so getting back to the Brewers aspect of it, if we look at the town of Nuremberg back in Germany, it was not a part of Bavaria at that point in time like it is today, and they had a little more autonomy over what they were able to do, who they were able to do business with, and they actually shared a rather good societal, economic, and political friendship with the city of Prague. Now, the Jewish Brewer Star origin theory, that's a weird sentence, suggests that the Jews of Prague were able to travel to the city of Nuremberg, where they were able to share their ideals and their culture with the Jews of Nuremberg, who then went and incorporated that ideology into their own cultural identity, taking that symbol and incorporating it into their own various professions and industries, and it just so happened that it stuck with the brewers industry. But like all these theories, there is kind of like a hitch in the draw here, right? The fact being that in Nuremberg, the Jewish people definitely did not have the type of freedom that they had in Prague, and they were subjected to much harsher societal restrictions and were unlikely to hold any type of prominent position in a brewery or in the Brewers Guild, you know. Possibly there were some workers in there, and maybe like through some grassroots, movement that started to rise up the ranks as like a protection symbol or something like that, a cultural identity of the people working there. But it is unlikely that just right off the bat they had enough influence to really incorporate that into the overall zeitgeist of the beer industry. The last theory that I think is probably the most plausible is the fact that the hexagram symbol has always been an important symbol, a sigil of protection across all of human society. It's very possible that early medieval brewers started utilizing this protective symbol, which also doubles as a fire ward, as their identity, as their protection symbol. Because if you really think about medieval brewing, these were people who had large open fires inside of wooden houses surrounded by other wooden houses in a city surrounded by other wooden houses. Having a little extra protection against fire would have been very, very useful and maybe a little comforting. I told this story in my Zoigl video, but it's so awesome that I would like to share it again. When I was actually in the Oberpfalz region trying to hunt down these Zoigl beers, I was staying in the Puttner Brau brewery in a small town known as Schlammendorf. And all over the Puttner Brau hotel and brewery, they have the Zoiglstern, the brewer's star, right? Plastered up everywhere. And when I woke up one morning, I saw that there were multiple buildings that had been burned down in the city while I was sleeping. I woke up to ambulances, fire trucks, the police. They were just everywhere, and I was just kind of freaked out that a portion of the city could burn down very, very close to me without me even knowing. But I was safe, and although I am not a superstitious person, I definitely chuckled to myself thinking maybe it was the star that protected us. I wasn't really able to find any type of arguments that dissuaded this theory, other than there's just no record or evidence that explicitly states, yes, this is what the star was for, this is why we use it, right? But I was able to find some potentially supporting information that kind of explains why the symbol was adopted. So if we look at the Brewer Star across all of Germany, not just in southern Germany, in the Oberpfalz and Bavaria region, we will find a 6-pointed star, but it's hollow bodied. It doesn't have the hash that gives it that inverted triangle look, right? And the theory is that the patron saint of brewers in southern Germany is a man known as Saint Laurentus. Saint Laurentus was actually burned to death, roasted alive on a metal grate that had like the hashes. And it's possible that the brewer's star, as it's known in other places, was originally used in southern Germany, but they added the hashes in there to replicate, to symbolize the grate, because Saint Laurentus is known as the patron saint of brewers and fires, despite the fact that he has nothing to do with brewers other than the fact that brewers worshipped him and gave thanks to him for protecting him from fires. So it's possible, it's plausible, I would dare say, that the brewer star, the one we understand and recognize today in southern Germany and for the Zoigl beer, all originated from some wider accepted six-pointed brewer star combined with their own religious beliefs, fusing together to create what we now call the Brauerstern. So that's all the major theories I found for its origin, for its utilization, for its purpose. But let's just be 100% honest. Nobody truly really knows. I will say that one of the staff members over at the Schlenkerla Brewery in Bamberg, Germany, they wrote an entire college thesis paper on this, which was incredibly helpful for the researching of this video. But even he states in there that it's just unknown. Like, it's all theories. So with all the origin theories and speculations out of the way, let's actually talk about how the Brewer's Stern, the Brewer's Star, is actually utilized within the brewing industry. So as I mentioned, it is a bit of a billboard for consumers. Hey, there's beer here, I should come drink beer. And in theory, the producers are utilizing it as a protective sigil, some type of superstitious marking, right? But there are some other interesting utilizations as well. In the city of Nuremberg around the 1500s, the Brewers Guild actually adopted the Brewer's Star as their official symbol. It was affixed to all their marketing. It was a part of their cultural and industrial brewing identity. But how they utilized it was incredibly interesting. In the city of Nuremberg, there was a historical traditional beer style known as Rotbier or Rotbier, which is red beer. But they also had a very, very healthy white beer industry as well. So breweries who focused either on red or white beer would affix the Brewer's Star onto their building, and either in the color red or white to indicate to the consumer what type of beer they were brewing and selling in their establishments. You can still see this in the city of Nuremberg at the Hausbrauerei Altstadthof, which was made famous for reviving red beer, and it carries on the tradition with a large red Brewer's Star painted on the walls of their building. The utilization of the Brewer's Star, it spread far and wide all across Germany, eventually into other European countries, and you can even see some examples in America as well, as German immigrants moved across the globe and they took with them their beer brewing history, knowledge, and traditions. And it kind of symbolized, I left a little bit of a marker, a trail, like, hey, this is where our people went and this is what they're doing, continuing on the old ways. And it proliferated and spread across Germany until the 20th century, when some bad stuff happened. The Brewer's Star essentially ceased to function, ceased to exist at the turn of World War II. As you can imagine, the Nazis were probably not too fond of having a six-pointed star, which they were now referring to as the Judenstern, or the Jewish star, a part of their industrial efforts, a part of their cultural identity, even if its origin points were completely segregated from any ethnicity or religion. The Nazis had outlawed and forbid the utilization of any six-pointed hexagram for any industry, and any place that utilized it was possibly under inspection or some type of restriction, right? Now, after the Nazi regime fell, the Brewer's Star just really did not come back into any type of prominence. You know, you might find a speckling of breweries that still utilize it in Germany, you know, one up here in the north, you know, one out here in the west, but largely it has fallen out of fashion. And because of that, it has also been a bit amputated from the public perception of the beer industry. You know, it's kind of a symbol that's lost its meaning, except for one region. The Oberpfalz region, where Zeugl beer is brewed. It was always their symbol. It was always a part of their cultural identity. And as I mentioned last week, the concept, the definition of Zeugl beer is one of community and tradition. So as soon as they were able to bring back the Brewer's Star, the now known as the Zeugelstern, because it's been so isolated and it's been just so ingrained into Zeugl beer culture. And although I do wish it would make kind of a comeback, you know, it's such an interesting and unique part of beer history, you know, especially in the world of beer history of advertising, right? But I just really don't think it will ever come back into prominence, really. I mean, the hexagram now is just so incorporated and so ingrained in most people's minds as being a symbol of a religion, of an ethnicity, of a political movement, that people might not agree with and might not like and might not want to support, you know? And I just don't think any modern day brewery is really going to pump back out the traditional Zeugelstern, the Southern Germany style Brauerstern. I just don't see it happening. It would be too much conflation going on.
I kind of confirmed this line of thinking when I was looking at the potential of Zeugel migrating to America, and I saw that there already is 2 Zeugel themed breweries located in America, but I don't think they truly live up to the core essence of the Zeugel brewing process being a local type of, not the point. The point is also in their branding, they do not have the Zeugel Stern. No 6-pointed star, hollow or with grates. So I just really don't think the Zeugel Star has much of a future outside of Oberpfalz.
I will say that if you've ever heard of the 6-Point Brewery in the United States, they are kind of utilizing the Brewers Star in a manner of speaking. More of the hollow body, less of the graded hexagram. But still, I found that incredibly awesome that they're in a small sense, the Brewers Star is still alive. I don't think most people recognize that, but I mean, at least 6-Point Brewing does themselves, and I think that's incredibly awesome. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I know this was a little bit more of an esoteric, oddball type topic to talk about, but it was just so fascinating when I fell into this rabbit hole trying to research a beer style, and I discovered this amazing history behind just something so simple as a 6-pointed star on a couple of bottle labels. So thank you. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. Remember, there is a story in every bottle, and that life is beautiful. Cheers.